you're doing it that rapidly, but you never see that fourth dimension. You always see continuing series of 3 space changes. But each one is an individual snapshot, individual frame in the camera at the moment it's taken. So you see it just like a motion picture. You see this series of frames, very rapid series of frames, and so you infer the motion and the time and all that. But we never experience time directly. We can't see it. I mean, I look every which way I can. I can't see that fourth angle over there in that corner where I've got length, width, and height, but I can't find that time angle sticking off there. I can't see it.
So do you think that there's an analog there with the Zen masters who?
Yes.
Their focus is the now, which becomes...
The Zen master is using 5-law logic. The first problem that you have in Zen is to violate the 3-law Aristotelian logic, which is fitted to photon entropy. That's this ordinary garden variety physical world and, materialistic world. That's all you're getting if you're doing that. You've got to escape past that if you want to get to what he's trying to do. And the first thing he has to do is he has to try to break down that unconscious total lock of this 3-law logic on a person. So most of the Zen method, for example, is devoted to doing that. Look at the dialogues. You'll see a Zen master looking around and saying, I want you to look at this flag on this pole. Is that flag for real? And he'll have a student that says, oh no. The flag exists in my mind, the pole exists in my mind, and the earth under my feet exists in my mind. It's not real at all. Whereupon the Zen master will strike him in the face, knock him down, and he will say very calmly and very politely, was that real? And the fellow will get up and say, I have to admit that was real. And he will say, fine, go continue your studies, you're not quite there yet. And the new student just starting in will see all that, and it's his turn next. And the Zen master turns to him and asks him the same question and says, look around you and look at this flag on this pole. I want to know, is that flag real? And he said, oh, it's absolutely real, absolutely. And the Zen master gets a frown on his face, says, this fellow hadn't learned anything. Let him continue scrubbing the kitchen and doing his meditation. So you wonder then why? Because the same question, if you took the other answer, that wasn't right either. In other words, he broke up either or, you see. It gave him both and he didn't know about it. But what he's pointing out to him is when you do an either or choice, you've invoked a process. Before you invoke the process, it's not either or. So that turns out to come into play like a Venn diagram that we prove all the logic theorems with. One of the 3 laws is A is not identical to not A. Well, look at the edge of the block that you draw to represent A. What is the edge? Is it A or is it not A? Not A being outside that block. You can't say it doesn't belong to A because obviously it does. I can touch that anywhere from within A. At the same time, it totally belongs to not A because I can touch it out there. The Aristotelian logic fails. That law, the 3rd law, fails in real life. In physics, you meet this with a difference. Is this a particle or is it a wave? It's not either or, it's both and. It's how we observe it. We can observe it in one fashion as a particle. We can turn right around and observe it as a wave. Now, beyond observation, it's the same thing, but we're incapable of observing it and measuring it that way. But we have to think about it that way. That's what quantum mechanics is all about. So we run into the need for a different logic when we violate the simple photon interaction. Because, the normal physical world like we see. So, and the logic has applications because everywhere you apply higher logic, you can work out new things you can do you couldn't do before. The equations change or have different meaning, richer meaning. Things that became impossible before are now not necessarily impossible anymore. So another thing you'll find is you write the other law, you just write the 4th law, you write as A is identical to not A. And you say, now wait a minute, I've got a law that says A is not identical to not A, and I got one that says A is identical. Are they in conflict? You have to write a law that says how they are not in conflict. You say, that's your fifth law. So you either have a case where they are identical or you have a case where they are not identical. You see, that will be what your perception adds to it. But see, you've got to trace the perception, because you don't have an abstract A and an abstract not A. You have a thought A and a thought not A. And the old philosophers, not too many of them bothered to separate the idea that A was, in fact, not really A, not an absolute A. It was a process that made this, or perceived, or thought this thing A. And how can you have two opposites identical? Simply change the process that is going to do the perceiving or the observing. That's what we do in quantum mechanics. We change the process that does the observing. It's a particle. We change the process a little bit. It's a wave. So it's very useful, you see, because it works in real life, but it doesn't work in common, ordinary life, you see. I mean, there it's very simple. That car either hit you or it didn't. You can forget Schrodinger's cat. You're going to wind up either very dead or hurt, or you're scot-free. So you have to watch at what level you do. But it helps also if you do that kind of work a little bit, because it forces you to start to think with at least, hopefully, some kind of precision, instead of just grabbing a hold of everything and just slopping everything around. You start narrowing it in and say, I really don't understand. Like, we'll say, what is energy? And the professor will say, energy is the capacity to do work. Okay, let's think about that statement. Energy is capacity. No. I can have energy without having any capacity. And it doesn't have to have any work being done to have energy. The fact that I can use energy to do some work is of course, a fact. It has nothing to do with the definition of energy.
It's an expression of energy.
It's a characteristic that energy can perform. It has nothing to do with its nature. And that's why you'll find Feynman saying, people that do think deeply about this, saying in his 3 volumes, we really don't know what energy is. Today we can come a little closer at least. We can at least tentatively model it as energy alone is a curvature or a distortion of space-time. If you're using the space-time view, a relativistic view. If you want to use particle physics, it's a change in the virtual particle flux of the vacuum. And that's it. They are identically the same thing. But you're looking at them through a different set of glasses in each case. But it works either way you go. But you don't have forces or anything yet when you have the curvature of space-time. Until that interacts on mass, you don't have a force. The beauty of doing things like that is sometimes a tiny, tiny little thing that pops out is of vast importance. We have all been taught that we can only do leaky diode engineering. We got to fight nature tooth and nail. We've been taught that nature's not going to give you anything for free unless you fight for it. When in fact the exact opposite is true. We can have all we want from nature, energy-wise, if we would just ask for it in the right form. But if we fight her, she'll fight us like a tiger. We're forcing the fight on her. But we don't have to do it that way. The other thing is that some folks really don't want us to know is that it makes us realize we think that we have to pay as much energy to engineer forces, force systems, you see. We have to pay for all that energy that went into that huge force. We don't have to pay anything for the energy. We got to pay a little bit for the structuring and the control and the switching. We do not have to pay for the energy. See, that is the point that's been missed. So I can build very powerful forces that aren't doing anything yet by interacting with mass if I first build these energy structures with lots of energy and very well shaped and all like I want those forces to be. If I engineer all this and I pay a little bit for my switching and timing and structuring and all that stuff, but I get it all structured. Then I interact it with mass, and bingo, I got one huge force system just doing gobs of work. You can see both the benefits and the detriments of that. Benefits, you can see how you can do engineering with, instead of you paying for all the energy and brute force it takes to dig up the mountainside and put in a new road, In theory, you can do all of that with just a tiny bit of energy you put in and form the precursor patterns that make the forces, and then let the forces and dynamics do it. So it's a different kind of engineering. Weaponry, it means you can build very powerful weapons very simply and then put them into mass, and they are tremendous things. Far more tremendous than you would think of the guy in the laboratory building the structures. So that's what I call precursor engineering, is that it opens up and that's really the secret of Soviet energetics. That's what they did. They discovered what I'm calling precursor engineering. Trying to find some term that connects it right back into our physics, you see. We already know that there's no forces and force fields outside matter, but we don't use it. We haven't corrected our models.
So it's easy to build systems where one force essentially fights with another.
Everything we do, we fight forces.
And it's easily observable too.
That's right. We pit one force against another. So
we haven't grown past that.
We've gone past that. If we ever get it developed, and we don't wipe ourselves out and all first, if we'll go ahead and control ourselves a bit so we survive, and if we can apply this for the benefit of humankind, we can do very, very useful things, very needed, seriously needed. And we can do them with remarkable ease after we once develop the technology.
Well, it's almost as if history demands, as we evolve, or technologically evolve in particular, we also expand socially. And if we don't kind of toe the line,
that's correct,
then we are in error.
Well, I don't know how much you've read of my early stuff, but we looked early on at what it meant to be an intelligent tool-using species. There are two kinds of intelligence. One is a tool-using species, and the other doesn't have a good tool-using appendage. So, because tool-using means, that's what technology means, tool-using. So, one is the technological species, or going to be, and the other is a non-technological intelligence. The dolphin is a beautiful non-technological intelligence. We're so dumb we can't even interpret what the dolphin's trying to tell us when he's talking to us. John Lilly, for example, his dolphins finally gave up on him and started committing suicide. And he was very saddened because he said, I'm really not intelligent enough to be able to decipher their language and what it is they're really trying to get across to me. And they have given up in frustration. So, by whatever characteristic you set with intelligent, it can be, if you use brain size per body size, the greatest intelligence on the planet is a great blue whale, probably. But we are the technological species because we have a tool-using member. So that means we adapt tools. Intelligence means adaptability. And basically, when you get through all the hooey, that's what it means. And we adapt tools. Well, that's why we eventually could come down out of the trees. The technological species, eventually its tool feet will be faster than any other animal's foot. Its tool teeth will be sharper than any other animal's teeth. And so it will eventually dominate its biosphere by the power of its tools, particularly when it gets gunpowder and muskets and cannons and gets away from darts and bows and arrows and all. And but the problem with that is the behavior. There's two kinds of behavior. Genetic control, hardwired. You don't have to think about the sensations going to occur to you if you burn your skin. It's automatic. Wired in. But if you're going to learn to walk, you're going to have to worry about that. That's not wired in. It is for a little horse, but it's not for you. A little horse right after birth can get up very short and then scamper around. You can't do that as a baby. It's going to be months and months and months and months and months before you even start crawling as a baby. So what it does is we tear out, the intelligent species has to tear out a lot of its checks and balances that a species normally has about its own competition. A less intelligent species may have competition for females, territory, whatever. But when two male deer struggle for dominance, one of them weakens and flees. The other could easily chase him down and kill him, but he doesn't. It doesn't have anything to do with morality. He's a switch it throws. He stomps and snorts and shows the females what a fine lad he is and how lucky they are, and that's it. But a human, you see, that check and balance has been torn out, so we have more room for adaptive learning, learned responses rather than hardwired responses, software rather than hardware. So the human is quite often capable and will run him down and kill him.